Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to create a variegated colorway using some dipped or partially immersion type techniques, taking advantage of two mason jars. We will be dyeing our colorway in two steps, once in an all over color, and then we will create two other colors to dip parts of the skeins into, but at the same time, because we're going to use these mason jars. And so I think we'll create something beautiful and fun. Today's lab partner gets an extra special little shout out because it's her birthday. Happy birthday, Shanna Siegel. Thank you so much for being today's lab partner, and I hope that you're gonna have a really awesome birthday. Today, I also want to take advantage of some of the things I learned from a color mixing video I shared last November to create the perfect blue, teal, and blurple kind of colorway that we want, which happen to be some of my favorite colors and also our lab partner Shanna's favorite colors. So I think together we will create something amazing. Let's go get started. Today we are going to dye 100 grams of Knit Picks Swish DK yarn. This yarn is 100% superwash merino, and it absorbs color really wonderfully and quickly because it is superwash. I have pre-soaked it in just some plain tap water for, I would say, between 30 to 60 minutes, but in general, this yarn base really only needs around 20 to 30 to be completely saturated. We are going to start off going for this blue shade, which is a 1% depth of shade of Jacquard True Turquoise. A 1% DOS means we have 1 gram of dye per 100 grams of yarn. And so we are going to add this all over our skein. Then I'm going to dip the ends to create either a more purple blurple color or a more teal, using some either bright yellow or hot fuchsia. Now, what I need to think about are the proportions. So these two colors right here are the result of about a 1-to-1 ratio between the blue with either the yellow or the pink. So to get a teal, I will probably want less yellow. And then for the purple, I mean, this is, for the blurple, I would say probably about 1-to-1 is okay. But we are going to need to keep in mind that as we dye the other portions of our yarn, that it is not 100 grams. That would be too much of the other color. And we'll probably be between like 30 to 40% of each color. And so that's something that we'll have to consider as we are mixing the dye. So if this is our full skein, it'll be dyed all over in blue. And then we will take a portion, so maybe, I guess we'll calculate based on about a third, and we'll dip some in one jar and some in another, and then heat set that as well. So we have about a third of each color. That's our plan. But first, let's go start with our all over blue color. The dye stocks we are using today are only a couple weeks old at the time of filming. But if you want the most reproducible, freshest results, I would mix your colors fresh. If you have an older stock, just make sure to mix it thoroughly, like I am here. And the nice thing about a 1% stock solution, which is 1 gram of dye in 100 milliliters of water, we know that we just need 100 milliliters of our dye to get that 1 gram of dye. So we need 100 milliliters of our dye stock to be 1 gram, because that's how it is defined. And we are going to add that, and then we'll come in and stir things up. I've not yet added any acid to our bath, and that is somewhat intentional because this will allow us to get slightly more even color coverage in this first stage. Since the volume in the mason jars we are using today is a lot smaller, there will be more tonal a more tonal quality to those colors, but with this first stage we should get an all over beautiful bright blue. There we go. Now we could mix the colors separately and dip into each color individually, but sometimes there's no reason to make it more complicated than you need, and so that's why I'm starting with this all over color. Now I'm going to add, I think, 4 tablespoons of white vinegar, and we will stir things up. Just use everything I'm using today is dedicated dye equipment. that is not used for the preparation of food. All right, and I'm gonna take this over to the stove and turn on the heat, and we're gonna heat it for, I would say, about 20 minutes. And then check in. Here are the swatches from our color mixing exercise, where our blue, bright yellow, and hot fuchsia are each just a single color. And then we have 3 mixtures of 2 colors, with the one in the middle being a 50-50 mix. And then these ones are 3 parts blue, 1 part whatever the other primary is. And so we can use this to get a sense, because we know the proportions of the colors, of how much of the yellow or pink we want to get a teal color or a more purple color. Now, we could go for a 1-to-1 ratio. And that color with the pink might actually be what we want. That gives us a beautiful blurple, so a bluish purple color. But if we did the same amount of yellow, that actually gives us a little too green. And so I think we might not need very much yellow at all. This is starting to be a little teal, but we could go even further than a 75% blue, 25% yellow proportion. Let's say for our purple, we want a 1-to-1 ratio between the pink and the blue. This means that we will want to have 1 gram of pink per 100 grams of yarn. And if what we're gonna do is about 1/3 of the skein, then that means we'll need about 33 milliliters of pink. Since 1 gram of dye is in 100 milliliters, if we need 1/3 of that, that's 33 milliliters. Now the teal. This one's a little bit trickier because I think we want something more than a 3-to-1 blue to yellow ratio. So I don't think that that's what we want. I think we want something even more extreme than that. So I think let's go for a 4-to-1 ratio of blue to yellow, which would be 20% yellow. And so this would mean that we want 0.2 grams yellow per 100 grams of yarn. And so if we're only going to dye 1/3 of the yarn, this means we need about 6.6 milliliters of our yellow on 1/3 of the skein to get this 4-to-1 ratio. I really hope that this math wasn't too confusing. Everything is ultimately an estimate because I'm estimating how much yarn we're going to add, but these are good starting points to get the colors that we want based on some colors that I have swatched previously. You know, it's interesting. I used to be team no color card. And I'm still not sure if I'm going to make color cards, but I probably should make color cards because being able to refer to these minis and the colors on them is so helpful when trying to design the exact color that you want. I'm going to make sure to shake up my stock bottles. I've added approximately 2.5 cups of water to each of these mason jars. The actual proportion is not that important, but I did not want to add too much liquid. Oh, perfect. My 10 ml syringe fits in the yellow dye stock bottle, so I can have 6.5 milliliters of yellow. I'm going to go ahead and rinse out the syringe. There's a fair amount of pigment in there, but definitely not as much as we've seen in the past, and we may decide that we need a little bit more once we put the yarn in, but we will see that later. And now I need to measure out approximately, after shaking up our fuchsia, I'm going to measure out approximately 33, let's see, 1, 2, there we go, 33 milliliters of hot fuchsia. If you'd like to learn more about any of the tools or equipment, especially my syringes and graduated cylinders, I will have affiliate links for all of these down in the video description. And the one thing that we do care about now is we want things to be really well mixed when it is time to add the yarn. I'm not adding any acid in here at this stage. There is going to be acid in our yarn. And so I'm not entirely sure how to best deal with adding the yarn in and how that's all going to go down, but we will see when we're ready for that. But at least the colors are all ready. It has been 20 minutes and there's still a little bit of color left. When I did my swatch samples before, I did it as a cool vat technique and actually let everything sit for a while, close to a week. But let's go ahead and add another 3 tablespoons of white. And now I'm gonna stir it up and I'm actually gonna turn off the heat and let the yarn cool off in the pot a little bit. The yarn is gonna get more steaming, so if we don't absorb 100% of that color right now, it's not the end of the world, but ideally we do want the water to clear. After around 20 minutes, almost all of that blue color is in our yarn. So I'm now going to set this aside so it can cool completely so I can comfortably handle it, and we can set up our next stage of color. While we wait, there was a tiny bit of dye left in my graduated cylinders. A little bit of blue and a little bit of pink. Right here, I have a skein of dry Stroll fingering weight yarn. Now the dye pot is still warm and there's acid in here. And the yarn I'm adding is dry. And that's not very much pigment at all. Not very much. Ooh, but that's pretty. It's a lot more blue than I expected. I think I expected it to be a little more purple, but maybe I didn't check to see how much of the residual blue we had in here from just that turquoise skein that we just dyed. But we have a beautiful icy pastel tonal. And I think we've soaked up almost all of that color. But what I'm going to do now is turn on the heat. And I'm just going to go ahead and heat this for about 15 minutes. And then we will set it aside. And hopefully at that point, we can be ready to start playing with this skein. Okay, our blue yarn is not completely cool. But it is cool enough that I can handle it. Most of the water is no longer in the yarn. I'm actually going to get another zip tie to help me keep track of our midpoint. All right, I just added a zip tie to the approximate midpoint. It does not need to be absolutely even. But now let's take one of these sections and start putting it in some of that yellow. And ooh, just one dip and it's already looking very turquoisey to me. So I'm going to add our yarn and stir it up. There is a little bit of heat and there is acid in our yarn. We will eventually add more acid into the container, but for that starting point, that color is great and close to what I wanted. We're going to do the same thing with our pink. This is giving us a very blurple type colorway. I'm making sure to stir this up here in the container, but I think that this is working really well. Not sure how perfect it's gonna be, but I am excited and I don't think I'm actually gonna increase the water level here at all. I'm amazed that the pink is looking a little cloudy and dusty, but we've got a beautiful blurple blue in here and a beautiful teal in the other container. So I would say that for those hues we wanted, we did a really good job with our estimations. We'll see how they end up, how even and variegated it is, but this is just a fun way to go about this project. And now I need to take these jars and I'm gonna place them in a pasta insert so then we can go and place this whole thing into our dye pot so we can start heat setting these colors. Are these colors that I've got happening right here going to be the perfectly proportioned for like some kind of pooling colorway? Unfortunately, no. I'm going to need to add some more water for this bath. The proportion of each of the colors is not going to be completely even necessarily, but we'll take a look at that once the yarn is finished. However, this technique would work, especially if you bundled up or put it in an empty jar for the third color to do, say for a self-striping colorway, if you had a really long skein as a way to add multiple colors all at once. We're just doing it on a shorter, like 4-foot skein. I increased the water level of our bath so that it is just below the water level in each of the jars. This way the jars will not float, but as it heats up, we can get the heat from that pot all around, and we will cover it. We have not yet added any additional acid into these containers. There's acid that came in with our yarn, which honestly might be enough to absorb all that color. And looking down, I don't see a lot of yellow left in the water. I do still see pink in here, however. So after maybe 30 minutes, once I get the water bath up to temp, after about 30 minutes, then we'll check in and add more vinegar. After 30 minutes in the bath, I'm not sure how well you all can tell, but I think almost all of the yellow is absorbed and there's still a tiny bit of that pink left. So what I'm gonna do now is add 2 tablespoons of white vinegar into each jar. And oh, interesting. Interesting. So we definitely still have some pink in here. But we actually have some blue that is in our more turquoise patch. So that was interesting to see. Okay, but I have the heat on low now. I'm gonna go ahead and let things sit for an additional, I think, 15 minutes. Let's check back in. And ooh, it is warm. I am seeing still some pinky purpley kind of bleed. I am not super worried because things are warm. And when it comes to acid dyes, you can disrupt their interaction with yarn when things are warm. So what I'm gonna do now is turn off the heat. I'll leave the lid on for a while to trap some heat in there, but then in a little while I'll remove the lid and maybe we'll take it out, but I'm gonna leave it probably for a couple of hours to just cool slowly and give it time to absorb that leftover color. And the reason why I'm deciding to do this is that the additional acid and another 15 minutes with higher heat with the stove still on didn't result in a significant clearing of that color. So that's why I decided that we can just let it cool completely, because some colors do need that. They need to cool slowly in order to all absorb for those last like little bits that are in there. So we'll check in soon. Everything is now completely cool. So let's check. Wahoo! I see maybe the barest hint of pink in there, but this yarn is beautiful. We've got this blurple. It's very blue, but we knew that from our proportions. If we wanted it to be more purple, we needed more than that 1-to-1 ratio. And then actually, I think we could have done even less yellow. On camera, it's looking more turquoise than it is in person. In person, I'm seeing more of sort of a green that's on the tealish side, but let's go wash this yarn. The color is a little more accurate here. It's still looking up a little bit more blue, but don't forget that I estimated how much yellow to add based on what I'd done before. And clearly, I overdid it a little bit, and maybe I need to add less. Is this still gorgeous? Oh, absolutely. Now I'm going to, okay, we're seeing a little bit of pink rinse out, but actually, lifting it up, it's not as bad as I thought. Yeah, I'm not really seeing any color come out. I'm now gonna add some dish soap. And we will see what we can see. I mean, there's the barest hint that I almost wouldn't notice. And it's a little hard to tell if it's like a reflection from something. So I am really, really happy. Oh, and at this point I should also remove this zip tie. And we can focus on our yarn this way. It's so pretty. So pretty. I am so happy with how this turned out and that we're not seeing bleeding anymore, or really at all, giving it that time to cool off slowly. I had a feeling it might need that because I think that the Hot Fuschia has that similar pink to what's in, say, Purple Pop. But now I'm gonna go put this through my spin dryer and we can come and wash our Leave No Dye Behind skein. Here is our leftover yarn. It's a little messy, but I love how we've got these hues in here. There's almost a palish blue here in the center. It feels a little bit green, not because there was any yellow in our dye, but because there's a little bit of yellow to the yarn itself. Bare yarn is typically off-white versus being bleached and being a pure white. And so, yeah, I feel like a little mintiness in there. But I'm not seeing any bleeding. So I am going to rinse out all of the soap, put this through my spin dryer, and then we'll come back and look at the finished yarn. Here is the finished dry yarn. And whoa, we have some huge contrast between the yarn that we were dyeing today and then the leftover dye. This almost disappears next to the vibrancy and saturation that we have in this, it's almost macaw feeling colorway. Although maybe it needed some red. I don't know, it's making me think of a parrot. What we created with leftovers is simple. We've got light and dark just from dip dyeing it sideways. And you know, you might end up seeing some micro striping if you were to use this on socks, or you could potentially get some fun pooling depending on the repeats. But it's so subtle that this would hold up really well with complex stitch patterns. Now on to the star of our show. And I think that we actually got pretty close to what I was going for. The blue is spot on. It's a 1% depth of shade of that true turquoise, which is the same as what we had on our swatch. Here are the remaining swatches. And as a reminder, we had our 1% true turquoise. And then we also we went for this sort of more medium blurple color. And then I wanted a teal. This is still pretty green. I wanted it to be a little more blue than this green. And I think we achieved it. This color does not look identical to our swatch, but what we have here is a 2% depth of shade. So we had an equivalent of a 1% depth of shade, 1% of the turquoise, and then we added on approximately, because estimated a third, an equal amount of the pink. And so I think that depth-wise, this color here, this purpley blue, is deeper, but I think the hue is similar. It's just more saturated. It's pretty close, but hard to say exactly. Actually, I think that I did make a little bit of a mistake. So this yarn is 75% blue, 25% yellow. And I did a calculation that was incorrect, I think, for this green here. And I was like, oh, let's have it be 20% yellow, 80% blue, which would actually give us a color close to this. But I calculated that yellow, forgetting that I had about 1 gram of dye on here already. So I did mess up with that calculation I showed towards the beginning. My mistake was a bit of an error in our favor because I overestimated the amount of blue that I would have there and underestimated the yellow. So instead of, on this third of our yarn, approximately, I had, I would say, 1 part yellow and 5 parts of our blue versus 1 part yellow and 4 parts of the blue. So we still probably needed even less yellow to get it more of a teal, but it is more teal than this green that we have right here, which was the most teal of our green samples. Now, for mixing the colors that I want, it would be easier for me to have mixed each of the colors separately and then added the amount of blue and the amount of yellow, or the amount of blue and amount of pink, versus dyeing the blue first and then layering on the second color. But what this does is gives us a really nice transition between the blue and this more teal, and then the blue and the purple. And so if I had just dyed the blue section first and then dipped into the other colors, we would have 3 main colors, but you would see also a section of overlap, or potentially there could be some pastel or white left behind. And so doing it this way gave us a really, really saturated colorway, and it just worked so, so, so well. I am not done playing around with combining these colors, and in addition to more triangle exercises that I hope to do, I hope to play more with mixing colors in general in the future and playing around with different ways to do that. So if you have any suggestions, please let me know down in the comments below. Shanna Siegel, thank you so much for being today's lab partner, and happy birthday! Happy birthday! If you'd like to learn more about how you can be a lab partner, get shout outs in the video, and some yarn that's dyed in the video, you can learn more in the listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. There's 2 different ways, so make sure you read the whole video description to understand the differences and everything that goes into it. And if you have questions, you can always message me on Etsy. But please just message me on Etsy if you have a question regarding one of my listings there. If you have questions about dyeing yarn in general, leave them in the comments section. I do check and try to reply to as many comments as I can. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and please subscribe and smash that bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. I release 2 new videos every single week on Tuesday and Friday mornings, plus we have bonus series along the way, and I try to keep it going even through holidays. It's so much fun, and I cannot wait to see all of the beautiful colors that we are going to create this year. Thank you so much for watching.